Welcome to Plato's Cave. I'm Jordan Myers, and I'm a master's student in philosophy at the University of Houston. You're listening to a reading group episode of the show, which means that in this episode, I discuss the paper Freedom of the Will and the Concept of a Person by Harry Frankfurt from 1971 with two non-philosopher friends, Adam and Giffen, because philosophy shouldn't just be for philosophers. So this is part 6 of the Moral Responsibility and Free Will series, where we discuss the aforementioned paper by Harry Frankfurt. This is just, it's a very, very fun paper. Frankfurt talks about, he introduces this term, first and second order desires and second order volitions, and he talks about what these conceptually mean for freedom and responsibility, but also, just as the title implies, the concept of what it means to be a person. So I think this is one of the most classic papers in the responsibility debate. It's one of the most classic papers in all of philosophy. It's really, really fun, and I enjoyed the discussion very, very much. So I hope you enjoy listening to it as well. And with that introduction, here is our discussion. I liked this paper. It's a fun paper, I'd say.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Very fun.
Yeah. And it is an incredibly, I don't know if you guys are aware of this or not, but like it's an incredibly influential paper. It has like over 5,000 citations.
I don't know whether it was just because, I had just finished the paper, but I was kind of beginning to side with him a little bit on his framing of moral responsibility at the end there.
So I don't know how much he actually says about that. Like about moral response. We should save it until the end.
Yeah, let's go through it naturally. This paper was a little bit of a roller coaster.
It was. You know what was funny, Adam? This is the same Harry Frankfurt that wrote On Bullshit. It's the same guy.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And knowing that as I was reading it, I could see a lot of parallels in the way he argues. Between this and the On Bullshit. I mean, this is a more technical paper than On Bullshit. That was more of a fun kind of conceptual analysis paper, but there's a lot of parallels in it. You know what's interesting though? If I had planned out, this series better, I actually might have had us do a different paper by him first in 1968 or 1969. I can't remember. He wrote a paper called it's something about alternative possibilities, about a conception of free will. And I honestly don't recall how much this builds off of that or not. But that paper is incredibly short. It might be an interesting one to maybe me check out and see if we want to follow up on. The paper title is Freedom of the Will and the Concept of a Person. And I like the way that he kind of frames the discussion too, because he doesn't start out in the kind of typical dry way of just saying we need a tighter conceptual analysis of what it means to have a free will, and I'm going to endorse a compatibilist notion of it. He talks about what it actually means to be a person as differentiated from an animal, and he says that a lot of the time when we just differentiate persons from animals, we talk about physical characteristics and psychological properties, but he says it's more than that. There's more than that in what we actually want to call a person and what we don't. On page 6, second paragraph, he has this great quote. He says, "There is a sense in which the word person is merely the singular form of people, and in which both terms connotate no more than membership in certain biological species. In those senses of the word which are of greater philosophical interest, however, the criteria for being a person do not serve primarily to distinguish the members of our own species from the members of other species. Rather, they are designed to capture those attributes which are subject of our most humane concern with ourselves." Which I liked the kind of the way of framing it there. So he says it's his. He has he actually kind of has a very slow build to this. It takes a couple of pages for him to really get into what he's going to talk about, which is funny given that it's not a very long paper in the first place. But he says that there's an essential difference between people and non-human creatures found in the structure of a person's will. he says human beings are not alone in having desires and motives or in making choices, but it seems peculiarly characteristic of humans that they are able to form what he calls second order desires, or desires of the second order. And I liked this paper a lot, but I actually have some notes in places. Like, I found myself having to revisit definitions just to make sure I was keeping things conceptually straight in my head. But he's just introduced what I think is his first kind of term, which is like a second order desire. And he says, besides wanting and choosing and being moved to do this or that, men, he's writing in the 70s, so it's men throughout the paper. It's not very progressive. But he says men may also want to have or not to have certain desires and motives. So that's his definition of a second order desire, is whether or not you want to have a desire or not. So like an example of this is, it's less relevant now, but like back when I was like, just kind of, socially drinking more, like, sometimes when we would do a podcast, I would want to have a drink during it, just to kind of kick back, relax. Then there's the question of, so I can have the desire to have a drink or not. But then you can step back and ask, do I want to desire a drink or not? And so that's the difference between like a first order and a second order desire on his account. So then he kind of brings up the concept of a will, which is different from either of those two things. And he brings it up on page 8 in the PDF. I'll post it for people. Third paragraph, he says, to identify with an agent's will is either to identify the desire or desires by which he is motivated in some action he performs, or to identify the desire or desires by which he will or would be motivated when or if he acts. An agent's will, then, is identical with one or more of his first order desires. So he says, rather, it's the notion of an effective desire, one that moves or will or would have moved a person all the way to action. So the will is basically, as I'm understanding him there, it's the effective desire, meaning kind of, for lack of a better term, the most powerful one, the one that actually initiates action or would initiate action. And so that is what constitutes the will. So there's multiple desires, and the one that is effective is the will. And so then he talks about there's two kinds of situations. He says there's two kinds of situations in which it may be true that A wants to do X or wants to X. So A being an agent and X being an action. And he says, in the first place, it might be true of A that he wants to have a desire to X, despite the fact that he has a univocal desire, although free of conflict and ambivalence, to refrain from Xing. Someone might want to have a certain desire, in other words, but univocally want that desire to be unsatisfied, which is interesting. And he gives, I liked the example that he gave of it. Actually, there's like a Black Mirror episode that kind of takes this and makes it technologically relevant. Have you guys ever seen that episode? It's a good, Adam. I don't remember the name of it or anything, but it's that doctor. He has that kind of neural link thing. Yeah, it's a great episode. Yeah. Because I know that Charlie Booker, I can't remember if it's Booker or Brooker, who makes that show. He has like a philosophy background. I wonder if they actually got that explicitly from this paper. That'd be very cool if they did.
Good episode though.
We could do that as an episode of this for sure. But so he has like the example of a physician who wants to experience what it's like to be addicted to something, and he wants to have the desire to take a drug. He wants to feel what it's like to be addicted, but he doesn't want that desire to be effective. He doesn't have the will to do a drug, but he he's okay with having the desire to do it. He does not want this desire to be effective. He doesn't. Frankfurt says he may not want it to move him all the way to action, which is interesting. And he says it would thus be incorrect to infer from the fact that the physician now wants to desire to take the drug that he already does desire to take it. It would thus be incorrect to infer from the fact that the physician now wants the desire to take the drug that he already does desire to take it. Oh, I guess he's just saying that like there's a potentiality to it. Yeah, no, I get what he's saying. I think he's saying there that like you don't have to already have a desire in order to want to have that desire, right? I think that's what he's saying there.
Yeah.
Like
the condition of having the second order desire, but not the first order desire. Is that right?
Yes. Okay. Yes, it's it would be like the condition of like potentially wanting something, or wanting to have that desire, even though you don't currently have it, which makes sense to me. Like I find that psychologically is pretty tight conceptually. So that's the first type, is where there's an unfulfilled desire for X. And then there's a second kind of situation that may be described by A wants to want to X. So this is where the first and second order desires align, I guess. And he says, then it does pertain to what A wants his will to be. In such cases, the statement means that A wants the desire to X to be the desire that moves him effectively to act. It is not merely that he wants to desire X. He wants the desire to X to be among the desires by which, to one or agree to another, he is moved or inclined to act. So moves him effectively to act. So this is the one where, I mean, right, am I getting this right? That this is where his will is endorsing the first order desire, right? This is where his first and second order desires align. So there's a case in which they don't align, and there's a case in which they do, right?
Yeah, it would be, but he differentiates between desire and will, though, right? Will is synonymous with first order desires.
No, will is synonymous with the effective desire, right?
Which is, but what did he say up here? He said,
what page?
Let's see, it might have been,
I think it was
8 or 9 here.
8, middle third paragraph of 8. He says to identify an agent's will is either to identify the desire or the desires by which he is motivated in some action he performs, or to identify the desire by which he will or would be motivated when he acts.
An agent's will then is identical with one or more of his first order desires.
But it has to be effective, right?
Correct, but okay. I think just for the sake of the conversation, though, you conflated desire and will there.
Yep, they're different. Because yes, so the will is the effective first order desire, and then there are desires of both the first and the second order kind.
Yes.
And the first case he laid out is where those two desires align or don't align, and then the second case is one in which they do, right?
Yes.
So that's the framework. Okay. Okay. And okay, if it is, I don't know exactly what this quote says, so I'm just going to read it out loud. If it is some other desire that actually moves him when he acts, on the other hand, then what he wants at that time is not, in the relevant sense, what he wants to want. Okay, so that's just clarifying that if it's actually some other desire that is synonymous with his will, then he was just mistaken about what he wants to want in that case.
Where is that exactly? I want to read that one again there.
Yeah, it's the last paragraph before section 2. The second to last sentence. I'll read it again.
Okay.
If it is some other desire that actually moves him when he acts, on the other hand, then what he wants at that time is not, in the relevant sense, what he
Is
I
that
feel like
true?
we might need to go back earlier.
Is that true? Because I'm
Well,
wondering.
well,
about
this
that.
is so. This is when he's discussing in the second case where A uh, has a desire to do X, and that's effective, and it's endorsed by him. And I think Frankfurt. Am I right? Is he just saying in that sentence that if it's some other desire that actually moves him, then what he wants at that time is not what he wants to want. Yeah, so that's just saying so if it's actually something else that's motivating him, then it's the case one, right? Where the first and second order desires don't align. Right. So I think he's saying that like you can kind of be mistaken about what you think will be your effective desire. But if it is something else that is effective, then and it's not what you wanted to want, then we're just back in the first case of where your first and second order desires don't align.
I think it all predicates on if you assume this is true, you've got to assume the want is how we defined it earlier, has to be the effective desire. Yeah, it has to be effective. Has to be effective.
Yeah, this last paragraph was doing exactly that. It was just saying just because you have the second order desire and the desire does not mean you like are quite there yet.
Yes. So it's like so I can have the desire to have a drink while we do a podcast, and I can either want to have that desire or I can not want to have that desire. And if I have a drink, that is the effective desire, i.e., my will.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So that's the definitional or conceptual framework that he sets up in section 1. I think he took kind of a long time to do it, but it was good, especially with the rereading parts. Like if you wanted to reread it, it was very rereadable. Because I know I definitely did a bit of that through this. So. Okay, so then he goes into section 2. Excuse me. And he says, someone has a desire of the second order, either when he wants simply to have a certain desire or when he wants a certain desire to be his will. So, okay, that he's just I think he's fleshing out more the concept of a second order desire, right? He says, in situations of the latter kind, I shall call his second order desires second order volitions or volitions of the second order. So second order volitions are when he wants a certain desire to be his will. When you want a certain desire to be effective, that is a second order volition. And it has to be the one that you want yourself to do at that point. He says, he says, now it is having second order volitions and not having second order desires generally that I regard as essential to being a person. So he's saying there's a difference in effectiveness here. It's like you can have second order desires to want something, but in order to be a person, you also have to have second order volitions. You want to have certain desires be effective in moving you or not. I'm understanding that correctly, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So he says it is. Oh, this is where he introduces the concept of the wanton. So he says it is logically possible, however unlikely, that there should be an agent with second order desires, but with no volitions of the second order. Such a creature, in my view, would not be a person. I shall use the term wanton to refer to agents who have first order desires, but who are not persons, because whether or not they have desires of the second order, they will have no second order volitions. So in layman's terminology, this would be a type of person who has these second order desires. So he has desires, clearly, like he's pulled towards different things in the world. And he has second order desires about what he wants to want, but he doesn't have second order volitions where he wants certain desires and not others to be effective. And this is what Frankfurt calls the wanton. Which is like, it's a very inadvertently funny concept. Like I found myself kind of like, smirking at this.
Ripe for humor.
Like, I like this concept of a wanton, because I don't think there's probably never been a person. Well, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's probably never been like a true wanton in like the deepest sense 100% of the time. But I like this idea as elucidating kind of different types of persons almost, or at least different types of persons. Like you could have like I think there are times where I am more wanton than others, you know.
Wantonly, I believe, is how he uses it.
Yeah. He says the essential characteristic of a wanton is that he does not care about his will. Remember the effect of first order desire. His desires move him to do certain things without it being true of him, either that he wants to be moved by those desires or that he prefers to be moved by other desires. Adam, this is where I was thinking of on bullshit. Remember where he says bullshitting is neither telling the truth nor conforming to the expectations of a lie. I saw like a parallel here where like a wanton is not having the second order volition to have certain desires be effective, but he's also like there's no positive or negative direction of a wanton. He's just acting on desires, right? Like he's not positively or negatively endorsing them. And yeah, he says in any case, adult humans may be more or less wanton. They may act wantonly, which is funny. Like I don't know. Do you guys like did this psychologically connect with you at all? Like I feel like there are definitely times in my life with like certain kind of areas of my life where I do act more wantonly than others. Just kind of driven from behind in some sense.
See, for me, it wasn't quite as intuitive. Well, he introduces the wanton specifically when explaining the possibility of having second order desires but not second order volitions, which is very kind of like specific difference. So it took me a little bit to conceptualize like what that might be. And he does introduce the caveat that like, it may be unlikely. So it took me a little bit to like fully grasp like someone who would want something, but not want that something to be driving towards action, like it's very hard to get in that framework of a wanton.
It is. Have you ever kind of rationalized yourself into like certain things though? Like, I'm trying to think of just kind of a recent example of this is actually not recent. Because I've been more focused on kind of like health and diet and exercise recently, but like previously, you know what? This was especially true in school. When I was in college, I would have the desire to kind of binge on certain things, whether it was like, alcohol or just kind of like shitty food sometimes, you know what I mean? And I feel like I would have that desire and I kind of wantonly wanted to have that desire almost. And it was like, I feel as though there were certain times in my life with certain things where I actually didn't deliberate about which I wanted to be effective or not. Like those are more dark moments, like for any human, because like he's right, like it's very subhuman of us almost, like you're just kind of doing things, and you can have these kind of I almost imagine them as like the second order desires almost seem epiphenomenal, like they almost seem like they just arise because the first order desires are being done, like you find yourself just kind of, I don't know, like maybe it's easier actually if we don't think about it personally, but like I know that like haven't you guys seen this in other people? Like this is so easy to see in other people, like acting wantonly. You're like, come on, you're like, like what example are you thinking of, Adam? Maybe a novel has it.
I mean, not like a specific example. I can think of one, but I mean, you're right. Like it is easier to see in other people. Like,
it's really easy to see in other people.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
So,
like if someone like okay, I had a friend in college. He's still my friend, but like I'm thinking about him in college. And like he was definitely heavier than he should have been, and well, that's true of almost anyone at like a certain point in time, like heavier than I should be now, but it was like he definitely could have lost some weight. And it was like I kind of know, like it was like you're doing a bit of projecting, you're doing a bit of like theory of mind, theorizing with this, but like it almost appeared to me as though he had this desire to kind of to eat poorly, and he had the desire to not work out, or he didn't have the desire to work out. And it was almost like he wanted to have those desires, or at the very least, he didn't have a problem with having those desires. But there was no second order volition. You know what I mean? He wasn't like, yeah, I want the desire to have sweets be effective. Like there wasn't that. I don't know. Do you know what I'm kind of?
I think it's easier to like conceptualize it in cases where like cases you just mentioned right there, where it's like someone is almost they feel almost blasé toward first order desires rather than like having
they're not fighting it.
Yeah, it's hard to conceptualize a second order desire that isn't a second order volition per se. You know what I mean? Like, because
case.
You know what I mean? Because
I
think it's much easier to kind of just
the lack of a second order desire is easier.
Yeah.
The difference is what we've really like grabbed, like was difficult for me conceptually. Like it's really hard to find a case where, especially maybe more or less in others, it's hard to say because it involves like their want of effectiveness.
Yes, so I feel like it is overwhelmingly like if we're thinking about cases in which the person is kind of acting wantonly, I feel like the vast majority of those cases are cases in which they at least they don't have a strong second order desire to not do something, right? Like it's kind of like maybe it's like you don't have a second order desire to continue to gain weight, but you certainly don't have a second order volition to lose weight, or like to be motivated to do the things to lose weight. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you seem almost there's no second order concern whatsoever to first order desires.
It's like a lack of critical reflection almost. It's like it's not that I feel like, and this is where I guess I disagree a little bit, but I guess I don't know if I disagree or not, but like I almost find that these cases are more often brought out by a lack of reflection, like a lack of actually cognitive recognition than a positive endorsement of something.
So in this case, is lack of like recognition or reflection indicative of a lack of a second order desire, or can that still be there in the way you just described?
Well, it's for sure a lack of a strong negative second order desire, right? Like
I really do not want to do this.
Yeah, like I really hate that I want a donut. You know what I mean? Sure. Because I don't know. So like what's an example? Like I'm just trying to think of, so what's an example where you have a second order desire and it aligns with the first order desire, but it's not a second order volition? Because I feel like he's not wrong with this, but I'm having a harder time coming up with examples because it's almost paradoxical, but I kind of do think people are inconsistent in their own minds like this. Do you know what I mean?
Honestly, I did struggle with trying to think of a second order desire, but not a second order volition kind of case. Like it was difficult.
Here, you know what? Here's one maybe. Sure. Okay, so what about someone who has? It's like okay, let's think of someone who has kind of like larger career goals, right?
Sure.
But they're doing like a waitress or something. Like they're doing this part-time job right now, kind of like before that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have the desire to make that money, right? Like they want the money, and then they have the second order desire. They want that money, right? I'm getting lost in the example, but they're not they don't have the second order volition for that desire to be effective. They actually don't like so to work that short-term job as opposed to really roughing it or something like to get to that further career stage or something. Like is that because it seems like they have the first order desire and they have the second order desire, but they don't have the second order volition there.
I'm curious if this is a case where like we're talking about like two separate things. It's like the desire for the money versus like the desire to work, right? It's like obviously related, but I'm honestly like, I mean,
the details of the details of the example were shitty.
I don't think they were bad. Like I'm actually better than what I could think of.
No. Let me refine it. Let me think about this. So how about this? So they let's use the same person. Sure. So they're getting money from their kind of temporary job now, and they kind of have like they could be, their plan was to save this to then put into like, the time off that it takes to like apply to these jobs, or like they're starting their own business or something, right?
Yeah.
They're I've got it. So they're buying things. They're like spending money on frivolous things now, right? So like they're buying a brand new TV or something. So they have the desire for the TV. And let's say that they actually endorse that desire. So they have the second order desire. So they're thinking, I want this TV and I'm okay with wanting this. Like I want this TV. But they don't have the second order volition for that desire for the TV to be effective over the desire, to save that money or something like that.
That actually is interesting, because it actually does seem useful to introduce like two separate desires to explain like the effectiveness being like different.
Yeah.
Right?
I feel like we're almost moving into like the third order desires by doing that, right?
I don't think, right?
Aren't you, because you're like comparing, so like the person wants to buy that TV, right?
Yeah, that's two.
Sure, but then do they want to buy that TV?
But I don't. Well,
but
I guess
you could say no because like the third order desire would be there for the other case because it was effective. Is that what you're getting at?
But isn't that the difference between a second order desire and a second order volition? That can account for that discord without the third level being brought in, right?
I'm curious if that's his definition though. If like the third order desire.
I'm just not following, honestly. Like it just sounds like you're pushing it one further back, where it's like, okay, they have like a greater goal, like in mind, but so then they would have to then kind of like examine, like a further desire kind of pushed back, like between like do they want to buy that, want to buy that TV. So
I guess I don't think that it has to be conceptualized like that, but so are you trying to are you saying there's no robust conceptual distinction between a second order desire and a second order volition?
No, it's just that he's saying it's logically possible, however unlikely, and I honestly didn't follow the example you gave. Like I didn't understand how that actually. I didn't understand how that met the criteria. Yeah.
I thought that. I mean, that kind of was useful to me.
Rephrase it then for me, Giffen, because I wasn't following that.
Okay. So the condition where we're trying to like bring to light here is where someone has a second order desire but not a second order volition. The difference being based on like whether they want it to be effective, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So in this case, the person is saving money, right, for like goals related to investment, right, in themselves or whatever. Okay. So they see it. They walk by the store. They see a TV. They want the TV, and they like reflect, and they're like, I kind of want the TV. Like the TV is like useful. It's like I could do a lot with it. It would be enjoyable.
You know how there's some people who are frugal and they're like, no, like what are you doing? And then there's other people who are like, yeah, treat yourself or whatever. Like there's that kind of like there's two like sets of mind to those. Yeah.
Almost like I want it because like they know it will be good for their mental health or something. Even.
Well, I don't think you need to specify the because.
That's true. You don't need to
just
specify.
Yeah, it's
you
just
want
that they
to
want
want
to want it.
Yes, that's true. I was trying to add some context.
I just wanted to keep it parsimonious.
Yeah. So they want the TV, but they're, I guess in this case, this is like their want to save is actually effective.
If they
There's like a conflict between the second order desires here of saving and buying TV.
So like Adam, I'm almost kind of visualizing it here. So there's like all of these, there's this myriad of first order desires that we're all kind of buffeted by, right? And all of those are connected, at least potentially, to second order desires, or like I'm okay with having these first order desires, right? But then the ones that almost get highlighted out of the larger group are the second order volitions, the ones that you want to be effective. So it's almost like, I'm really weirdly kind of like anthropomorphizing it, but you're almost like there are all of these kind of ones and you're picking which ones you want to be effective. Does that, I don't know, am I thinking about that in like a weird way, or like Adam, I guess I don't understand, are you, because if you're not trying to argue for the collapsing the distinction between a second order desire and a second order volition, can you give me an example of one then that like makes more sense to you?
No, I actually just don't really see the distinction too much here. Like
Okay.
it's kind of hard for me to like imagine how you could want something, but it's also you wouldn't want it to be an effective first order desire.
I
think
an example from another philosopher actually on this.
I can say this, one thing before the other philosopher comes in, because I think that might be useful. I'm just imagining the only case that I'm kind of really like grasping this is one in which there is actually a conflict between two like second order desires, right? The first desire is there in both cases. The second desire is there in both cases, but one will be effective and the other one won't be. Like
but that's when he introduces the third order desire at that point. Then that's the paragraph in which he introduces the third order desire when there's a conflict.
At the very end?
No, it's like maybe like 2 or 3 pages from now. Maybe that's nearing the end, but it's about halfway through. But that's when he introduces like the third order desires, when there's a conflict between second order desires.
And one wins out? But I did not think that he...
Yeah, because it doesn't need to be the case that there's like a conflict for there to be the second or the higher order desire.
Yeah, Adam, I didn't think that third order desires got...
Really?
Yeah,
Can we go to that section?
I remember it being like, in theory, you could go higher.
It's
and
on
higher.
page 16, right? He says there is no theoretical limit to the length of the series.
Well, hang on. I think you just skipped the part that was relevant to what I was. I mean,
well, he only introduces third order desires, I think, in page 16. Jordan's saying.
I don't know where it is before that.
Okay, another complexity is that a person may have, especially if his second order desires are in conflict, desires and volitions of a higher order than the second.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what Giffen just said. There is no theoretical limit
before.
Yeah, but you skipped that sentence. So I'm saying like that's where he introduces like, a conflict of second order desires to introduce like a third order desire, of like, wanting to want, like it's like you've pushed it back another.
Actually, so Adam, so now I don't know if this is exactly what you're getting at or not, but I'm like reading this and it's like, is there a case where there are not two conflicting second order desires, where there is like the second order desire but not a second order volition? Is that like a useful question? So the case we brought up there, which I thought Jordan like brought up, which was interesting, where you have the second order desire but not the second order volition, is one in which two second order desires are in conflict. Is it necessary is it possible for there to not be a conflict in the second order desires and still have like second order desire but not volition? Does that make sense? Or am I off the rails here?
No, it makes sense. I mean, I just don't know. It's just like the cases we brought up have like seemed more like third order desire cases to me.
Yeah.
Like
I'm curious
Jordan.
Would a third order desire merely be the one that directs what you want to be your second order volition? Like, is that all a third? Like,
That's
is there like a logical tie?
Was like, is your third order desire what determines which of the myriad of second order desires becomes the second order volition?
Okay, I get what you're saying there now.
I wonder if he would agree.
Yeah,
I don't know. Would he agree with that or not? Like,
I don't know.
Hard to say.
It
seems like he introduces like the third order desire as like another complexity here. So it's like it's not necessary to explore to explain like the second order volition, which makes me lean like no, he wouldn't agree that that's like the synonymous, I guess.
Well, I don't think they have to be synonymous for them to be. Would a third action or a third order desire merely be that thing that determines what of your second order desires becomes your second order volition?
Well, right. I guess the question would be then, like, to rephrase it, like, is it possible to have like a second order volition without a third order desire, or is it like logically like linked like that?
I don't know if conceptually that adds anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, because then you have to ask what determines which second order desire becomes the second order volition, and then it's like, well, you can just say that it happens on that level. Or you can say that that's just what a third order desire is. And I don't know. Like, I'm not sure if there's an important distinction between the two. I don't know. I mean, like, I think it makes more sense to have a third level. Like, it's like wanting. It's gonna get complicated as an example, but like
it is.
It's like, so I have a desire, and then I can endorse that desire. Mm-hmm. But then I can want to be the type of person that endorses that desire or not.
Right.
Right? It's something like that. Right?
Yeah. That sounds like 3 levels and explained well because you use 3 different verbs.
That honestly it's a problem of verbiage. Yeah.
It really is.
But like, right, so is it, I think it's okay. I don't think we're kind of bastardizing his framework here to say that what turns a second order desire into a second order volition is just a third order desire. Like that's, I mean, it has to be kind of that logically. Like that's what a hierarchical will would look like, right?
Well, that's the thing. It's like, I'm not sure if he would, and I only say that because he says like it's another complexity that's not really fully relevant.
Yeah.
Like, that's what it seems like to me. So I'm not sure if he would endorse like, yes, third order desires.
I just don't know if he really cares that much about it. Like I don't know if he kind of brushes it away because he doesn't care or because it's too complicated for the paper. Do you know what I mean?
True. I don't know.
I think that he's okay with my conceptualization of it. Okay. I would think that. I don't know. Adam, because this was your question, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I still fully buy it. Just because, like,
you don't buy it, he would agree, or you don't buy it in general?
I good question, because I mean,
maybe spell out what it refers to.
Exactly. I mean, we're speaking in like 3 tiers at this point. I buy the like tiered desires, no problem.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. Like, I still have like an issue with like effective versus non-effective second order desires.
I think I know your concern. I think I wrote it down actually. It's like, what does it mean for someone to want to have a desire but it not to be effective? Like, is that incoherent? You're asking almost.
I'm almost kind of at that point where it's like, so yeah. It's like, so
I wrote that question down and I found a potential answer to it.
Okay, we'll bring it up now because it's
yes. I actually wrote down the question verbatim is, why would someone ever want a first order desire that they didn't want to be effective? What's an example of this? Because like I had that very same thought. Because like so this is an example brought up by Tamler Summers from the University of Houston. He brings up the example of kind of like an older gentleman in the office who has the desires to, like, you know, fuck these younger women around him, right? But he wants to want that desire because, let's say, you know, it keeps him young, it keeps it, like, you know, kind of energetic at work, like there's a bit of like flirtation in his mind, right? But he doesn't want that desire to be effective because you know, he has a wife or something, right? He doesn't want to be, he doesn't want to have infidelity in the relationship, or he doesn't want to put his job at jeopardy. But he's actually okay with having that desire He just doesn't want it to be effective, which is to say he has a second order desire. He wants to fuck the women in his office, but he doesn't want it to be a second order volition. And maybe that's determined by the third order desire to not have, like, it's all, those kind of concerns are pushed into like the third order desire to keep a stable life or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of operating up in there.
Okay, so I think I can buy that now. I mean, even like, because the thing is, like, even though I don't really buy the premise, I mean, like, he says, like, is it logically possible?
It's conceptually.
Yes. Like, even though it makes because it makes no absolute sense, like, that someone would like want to fuck the younger women in the office, but not.
Why would you not want to have that desire?
Exactly. It's like it's a desire that they have that's a first order desire, right? It's also they want to fuck the women.
They're okay with having that desire.
But
they endorse the desire.
But they don't want it to be effective.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I agree with you. I had this very same concern. Like, do I have, like, I was asking myself, Adam, this very same question. Do I have any examples of this in my life? And it's like, I don't think I do.
See, I almost am coming around to the point that it does make sense. Like, I don't think it's absurd.
Wait. Is there anything in your life that you
I would love to hear
that you want, but that you don't want to be effective?
That's tough for me to like think of myself. I don't know. Honestly, it was like Jordan's explanations of the old coworker case, as well as like the part-time worker gentleman, as well as like the part-time worker case that I think started to make sense to me. And it makes sense specifically when there's a conflict in second order desires. Then, like that, when there's a case where there's a conflict of second order desires, it actually does make sense that like you would have the second order desire, but not want it to be effective because you have a stronger second order desire. That's like the case where it makes sense to me.
Or it's determined by a third order desire.
Well, yeah, that may or may not be synonymous. But
here's I think that it's conceptually very possible, and I think it is an actuality. Like, there has to be an old man who has those views, right? Like, that guy has to exist.
He wants to fuck the women. He wants to fuck the women. He endorses it because like he thinks it's like a positive trait to like, you know, be live.
It keeps him young or whatever.
Exactly.
Like that was the example that like Summers used.
So it is an explanation for the second order desire. But
he doesn't want it to be effective because of other competing second order desires. But Adam, so while I'm saying that, I'm questioning whether that is deeply irrational or not, and coming down on the side of yes, it's deeply irrational.
You think so?
Yeah, but it's logically consistent. Like,
yes.
Yeah, but so I'm fully on board with that now. But it's an absolutely ridiculous case. But
so
I actually don't think it's irrational.
Can I explain why I might think it is? So I contend that So let's take the case of the old man at the office, the older gentleman,
the more lively case.
I am deeply so. Like, I guess I understand the reasons why we might want to say that it's rational, but I don't think that those are very good reasons. Because, like, you know, he's like, it keeps. I think, shit. I had it phrased perfectly. I think that he. I've lost it at this point. I think that he. Why wouldn't he? If you have a desire that you don't want to be effective, there is, like, the natural question is, why the hell wouldn't you just, like, want that desire to go away? Like, why wouldn't you only want desires? And I guess I'm thinking, like, he could endorse that, like, it's good willpower, like, it's a good exercise of willpower, like, it makes him a more disciplined person.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe, like, but like,
to me, it's useful to imagine. For me, it's useful to imagine the case where, like, you know, he wants it, he wants to want it, and, like, but he doesn't want it to be effective so long as the other second order desire competes. But that the competing second order desire could always, like, go away. It could always change.
Then he's on with the women.
Exactly. I think to me it's rational, right? Like, once the conflict goes away, like, everything's lining up, right?
So it's a change at the third order level then, basically.
It seems to be the most I think I've come around to the idea that
I think Adam's coming around a little bit.
You think it's rational, Adam? The old man's a rational machine.
I honestly don't know. Like I'm not. I'm.
So Adam,
I mean,
what about this? What about this actually? So okay. No, but this
Adam wants to understand, and he wants to understand.
No. Here's the thing, Adam. I'm with you. I'm struggling to identify a case in my own life where I actually have this. Because like, let's just use a really kind of banal example. Like, I have the desire for just sugar and carbs, right? Like, it's donuts and shit, like cake, just gross ass food. Like I have the desire for that. I do not have the second order desire to want that. Like, I don't want that desire. And I sure as hell don't want it to be effective. Like, I sure as hell don't have a second order volition. And so like I'm struggling to come up with a counter case to that. That's actually true of myself.
I think I might have found something. Let's see if we can parse this out. So here's the situation I'm actually in, right? I currently don't go to a gym. The only exercise I do is like running. Whenever the weather's nice, just to keep myself floating, treading water. I want to go to the gym. I enjoy it. Okay. I want to go to the gym.
I'm on board.
Clearly, right? Straightforward so far. But I actually don't want that to be effective because I have some severely competing second order desires regarding work. I have been very busy trying to publish like 2 different papers.
Or you could use COVID risk as an example. Yeah.
That works too. Yeah. But you see how like I actually am not willing to change either the first order or the second order desire related to the gym. Yes. But like the competing second order desire is actually making me say, okay, I don't want that to be effective right now because like the third order desire is like I want to publish the paper more than I want to like get slightly more fit.
And that's determined by the third order desire. This is the type of person or the type of life I want to have.
Right. I want to be someone who endorses that specific second order desire.
Yeah. It's like which will or which desire do I want to be effective? Yeah.
Does that make a little more sense?
Yeah, I think I'm happy now that we've introduced like the third order desires into this. I think it can be explained with a higher level that it no longer becomes a second order volition; it becomes a second order desire. Because I think I follow that.
Wait.
That's
whoa. You mean reverse of that, right?
Well, no, because it would no longer be a second order volition, his desire to go to the gym. I mean, like it would now be a second order desire.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah. I was always conceptualizing it as different. There's like multiple second order desires, and those get elevated to the volition or not. So we were just thinking about it in different terms.
Yeah, but the point is,
you can also demote them too. Yeah.
So I think like
I think the default though is definitely like it's effective. Like unless there's like
that's
other
the first order desire, right?
No. It's we're talking about once you include the word volition, you're talking about you want a first order desire to be effective, right? Yes. So but once it gets demoted to second order desire, I think like
I don't have a lot of second order desires that aren't second order volitions.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think you might have more than you think. Like, I mean, I can't speak for you, but I think it's non-zero. I guess. Like,
sure.
Like, do you think the case that I brought up like made sense?
Yeah.
I mean, you can imagine like a lot of aspects of your life where like you're completely content being someone. I think I like that phrase. Like you endorse being that type of person.
Yeah.
Right. But like you endorse being the other type of person a little bit more. Right. I think there was probably a decent amount of conflicts in the second order desires there. It's just hard to probably think about.
No, you know what? I mean, that's fair actually. Like here's one for me actually. So like I enjoy like restoring the BMW that I have, right? Absolutely. And like I have the desire to restore it, and I want to do that. Like I'm happy to endorse that.
Yeah.
But there are some times where I don't want that desire to be effective. I don't want it to become a second order volition because of other competing desires and their second order desires, like applying to grad school. Like I need to focus on preparing for this conference instead of restoring the car.
Right. And the podcast is a good example of a like very solid third tier desires. Like it overcomes everything else. All second order desires. It is the case.
Adam often trades it for second order volition to get food at 8:30 every Sunday.
I didn't this Sunday.
No, you didn't have you didn't have the second order volition to do that this Sunday. Okay,
No.
okay. So then, so the wanton then, under our more developed understanding, the wanton would be someone who just walks around, kind of just living at the level of the first order then, because they have second order desires, but they basically don't have the power of a third order desire in order to select a second order volition. So they seem to just live at the first order, right?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, I can't. It like becomes almost illogical to me. Well, actually, it does become illogical right now to imagine that like who wrote the paper, Frankfurt. Yeah. It's
Well, this is a reductio of a person, right? Like this person probably hasn't existed, but like,
well, yeah, it'd be curious to see if it would, but
and this person would scarcely be human, like. You know.
I'm trying to imagine if Frankfurt would agree with our formulation of like including the third order desire in that definition.
I really
right?
think we should be okay. I don't think.
I agree that
yeah.
I think it makes sense this way, but I'm just imagining like would Frankfurt imagine someone
what else could a third order desire do as opposed to like select which second order desire becomes a volition? Like, what else could it do? Like, that seems to be the only thing it could exist for. So I guess.
I agree with you, but I'm not sure if he agrees because if he
I think he's
like endorsed that view.
So
I mean, this is from the 70s, so it's very hard to project so far backwards because he was like, you said this is one of the most cited papers in like the area. So I mean, if you're like charting the new path, it's really hard to like be too critical on him, right? But if he like thought of and included in the paper the idea of third order desires, but he didn't connect that to like second order volition, then that's disturbing to me, right? Like we just
but he's that kind of a writer though. Like he is like Frankfurt is that kind of a writer.
I can't say that certainly. No, you can say that with much more confidence.
I feel like he lets you make those connections though. So like here, listen to this though. This was right after the quote that Adam read. It is possible, however, to terminate such a series of acts being this like theoretical limit, or there's no theoretical limit, like there's second order, third order, fourth order, right? It is possible, however, to terminate such a series of acts without cutting it off arbitrarily. When a person identifies himself decisively with one of his first order desires, this commitment resounds throughout the potential endless array of the higher orders. So if you have, you have all of these kind of competing first order desires, you want to do a bunch of shit, and you're okay with having some of those, but only one can be the second order volition. And as soon as your third order desire determines which is the volition, then the three align and it's over. Like you don't have to retreat into fourth ones and fifth ones, right? So if he's not okay with how we're conceptualizing it, then I would disagree because like I think we've conceptualized it very neatly.
Yeah, that's honestly how I read that section too. That it's just like, if it all comes down to kind of competing second order desires, and if there aren't competing second order desires, then it's a second order volition. You know what I mean? Like pretty much.
There's no contest there. Yeah.
Because I think Giffen might disagree a little bit based on his facial expression, but I think. But do you not think that a second order desire is the default? A second order volition is the default unless it's in competition with other second order desires.
Oh, that's the thing. Like that is like the exact point where I'm not sure what Frankfurt like would agree with, like which formulation is, because I'm not like I can easily conceptualize someone now that has like the second order desire, but basically, not the third, tier desire. But I don't know if I can conceptualize someone with a second order desire that is not being competed with anything else, any other second order desire.
I've got one.
But also does not have a second order volition. Right? That's like the question I think you asked.
Well, no, I don't think that was Adam's question.
Was it not?
No. It's the fact that like it's talking about like whether you want like a first order desire to be effective, right? Like I'm not actually sure how you could,
I think I have an example.
Okay, you go ahead.
So you have a bunch of, let's use a food example, right? So you have a bunch of first order desires to have a bunch of different foods. And let's make it really like, let's make it, you're only aware of like 5 different foods. You're kind of like, this is like Mary the Color Scientist, but with like food, right? So you're only aware of 5 different foods in the world. There's only like 5 different things you've ever tasted, right?
Sure.
And only one of them is healthy. But likewise, you only one is healthy and only one is good. But that doesn't make any sense because you wouldn't have. So all of them are good. Oh, but only one of them is healthy, right? So all of them taste good, but only one of them is healthy.
Sure.
So you have the desire to have all 5 foods, but you only have the second order desire. You only want one of those foods. So there are no other competing second order desires. And so therefore there's no distinction, like that defaults to a second order volition because there is no other, or there are no other second order desires. But the minute that you are introduced to a 6th food and it both tastes good and is good for you, then you have 2 second order desires. You want each of those foods, but you have to have a volition for which one you want to be effective, which one you do actually eat. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I've been conceptualizing it, yeah.
No, I mean, just to be clear, that is also how I conceptualize it. I think it it's intuitive, it makes sense, and I think it's logical and rational. But the only thing I'm not sure about is if Frankfurt would turn his nose at like one of these.
Nitpick at that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, again, we can't really answer that.
I think here's what I will say, that we are so within the bounds of what's reasonable as an interpretation of this, though. Like we have to be. Like there's no way that we're outside of the bounds. And I think so. My example was very obviously contrived, but like
it was good though.
It was good, yeah, very good.
Well, yeah, but I was just saying that like I don't know if there's really ever a realistic circumstance wherein we don't have multiple second order desires, because like they're kind of always are just competing goods, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just read a quote about the wanton. He says, nothing in the concept of a wanton implies that he cannot reason or that he cannot deliberate concerning how to do what he wants to do. What distinguishes the rational wanton from other rational agents is that he is not concerned with the desirability of his desires themselves. So this is like, I think I'm actually getting his conception of the wanton even more now. Because it's like he has all of these, it's like a guy who has all of these kind of like second order desires. He like wants to want like a bunch of different food and like whatever. But he's just like, he doesn't even like, it's not that like this is the Frankfurt kind of like classic line by him, I guess, that's running through all of his work, is like, it's not that he wants any particular one or doesn't want any particular one. It's just that he's so dumb he hasn't even considered which one he wants. He's just kind of like, he finds himself doing one or the other. Right? Like the wanton is so unreflective or non-reflective in this sense. Does that make sense? He has no third order desire, basically.
So is that it then? The wanton is someone who does not have third order desires.
If you're conceptualizing it like we were doing.
Okay.
But again, I think we're just so well within the bounds of doing it. But I also think that like you don't need the the third order desire to, all you have to explain is that this guy is going around never actually endorsing a second order desire. He never has a second order volition. He's just like, yeah, I want to want all of these things, and like he just kind of, he, like, again, it's like,
I'm curious though, because at some, like, we have tied all of these ideas about like volition and will to actions themselves, right? And he is acting in all of these cases. So it's just a little bit difficult.
Not all of them are, like, you can have desires without them being actions.
Well, no, I'm not saying the desire. I'm saying like he acts, period, at one point, and then the second point is that like he has second order desires. So it's like it's weird that he does certain things. Like, is that not an endorsement, the action itself?
No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I don't think it is. And this is like. This is kind of the point that I was trying to get at in my like writing sample about the non-endorsement, or like the non kind of reflectivity about things. It's like the wanton would almost be always living in a state of just kind of finding himself doing things. It's not like he's not these kind of competing aims. He's okay with having both aims, and he chooses one. No, it's just like he's kind of like again, it's just hard. It's hard to it's hard to think about because it's uncomfortable, I guess, to do so. But
it's almost hard to distinguish between just like a very poor communicator who does have third order desires, right?
Yeah, I would I think this is harder when you think about like the externalization of it.
That's 100% true.
Yeah,
maybe I should introduce that.
I think a lot of this is like here's what I think Frankfurt's doing in this paper a lot is a lot of these things are indistinguishable externally. We can probably make inferences about when someone is acting in certain more wanton ways than others, but I think this is really more of an internal like paper by Frankfurt, right?
Yeah, I think like Giffen, would you? I mean, it's like if you were looking at like an animal, kind of going back to like animals, and it's just like an animal, wants to go drink some water. Like, does it want to go drink some water? That seems like a higher level that,
Yeah, that's the second order.
But it doesn't have a second order volition.
Yeah,
I don't even know if it has a second order desire in that case.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Like that's the way. That's the difficult thing is that whenever I think of animals, like I don't think of second order desires practically at all.
Wouldn't know me either. But like,
this whole
to be fair,
experiment.
Did you actually have that concept before reading this paper?
Huh? What do you mean?
Well, you said like when I think of animals, I don't tend to think of this. But I was saying like, but to be fair, like, did you actually have that concept before reading the paper? Yeah.
Like, do you have second order desires? Like, no, I've never thought to myself like. It is quite odd that dolphins have the desire, but not the second order desire. Like I have never had that thought, to be frank. But I'm like, when I read the paper, before this podcast, I was thinking to myself like what is the smartest animal, and does it have? Can I imagine it having a second order desire?
To be fair, though, like think of like a very sophisticated ape. Like we got to remember, like, dude, we're on a spectrum with it. Like we're not non-animals.
I know. I was thinking of dolphins, elephants, like chimpanzees. Like I was running through them.
I mean, here's the thing, though. We could, like, I don't know. There's probably a spectrum. Like, kind of a chimp does something and he's just scorned for it. You know what I mean? Like, maybe he doesn't want to want that anymore. I don't know. It's like it gets a little fuzzy with you.
It does. It's totally an externalization problem as well.
I
with the chimps
because it's clear. It's very clear. Like the concept of a person is this in like the third order desire or the second order volition, like whatever you want to like endorse. But it's that endorsement. It's like I've looked at these and I will endorse one of these second order desires, and that's the thing that clearly animals don't do or non-humans don't do. But like
Adam the smirk.
What?
I suppose. I just like earlier on that Frankfurt either way like says that it doesn't actually matter whether animals do this or not. I mean it doesn't matter whether like it's across several different species.
Yes,
we're more defining what it means to be a person rather than like species
just
specific.
a non-animal.
Yeah. So
it still is useful, I think,
because we can
consider. Part of the
like
spectrum.
think of Frankfurt's wanton. Like there is a very real sense in which that person's kind of subhuman. You know what I mean, though?
Yeah.
Right. Frankfurt uses language that would get him canceled nowadays, I fear.
No, I don't because this person doesn't exist really. I mean, like this person.
He did say that. Did he not say that young children would fall under this and possibly some adults?
Well, yeah, but like we don't like. No, I don't think he said adults. I didn't think he said adults fully fall into this. I think he said there are times where we act more wantonly.
No, I think he said there are possibly some adults who are.
I don't know, man. They're probably
and the same paragraph he says subhumans too.
Yeah, he said verbatim. What did he say?
Really?
He says. Perhaps it also includes some adult human beings as well.
All right, I was trying to save him. I don't know though. Are you guys like?
No.
Maybe he's right. Like, come on. I mean, maybe he's right. Who knows? Like,
Certainly some people came to mind, like when when reading this. So I don't know.
If you guys like, I gotta be honest. I found this concept just all too applicable for many people. Like, I, the, I am not lacking examples. I'm lacking in examples that I can anonymize. Like,
Yeah.
Okay, honestly, like people didn't come to mind as quickly to me, but like of terms of wantons. But like
I always had a low view of people.
wantonly behavior is a little bit easier to conceptualize than wantons.
Sure, I don't think I know a wanton truly.
That's what I mean. Like that was like,
Yeah.
we're just like I pass by some humans every day.
I think I know just like true wantons in my life, but like,
Yeah, I know people that literally don't differentiate between second order desires at all.
Adam, you do know true one.
I would have to think about it. I have to think about it.
I mean, but I can definitely think of people that, like, if I had to like bet on it, like they definitely like half the time don't differentiate.
Oh, I would bet, dude. Like, if you give me decent odds on whether 51% of the people 51% of the time are acting wantonly, I would take that bet.
Yeah, I mean, Giffen, like, based on like the way we've just conceptualized it, that
Sure.
people have want to want different things, right? I I don't think people are always operating at like
Even close to max capacity. Like,
I mean, I don't think some people are operating on the third tier there. So
No, I don't disagree with the wantonly behavior. I was curious if you truly know wanton. Like I'm like being serious. Like I was curious if you walk around and you say these people are wantons, like
dude, I don't
once
know.
in future wantons just all through their life.
I gotta be honest. Like, I'm kind of starting to think that maybe I do know a few true wantons. I don't know.
I
Like,
think I'm a
again,
little less pessimistic.
This is an inferential or like an inferential claim. Can you say that word? Like,
inferential?
Yeah.
Inferential.
I'm sorry, did I misspeak there?
I do prefer
inferential. Sorry. What did I say? Inferential. Jesus.
Inferential.
You can put down for that.
We're talking to a true wanton right now.
Quite wantonly behavior.
I wanted to say both inferential and efferential, and I didn't have a third order desire.
You wanted to say both.
So okay, we should get to the actual part that connects with free will about this. So he has this concept of the willing addict, and the wanton, and he says that the willing addict has conflicting first order desires. So he wants to take the drug of his choice, and he also wants to refrain from taking it. And in addition to these first order desires, however, he has a volition of the second order. He is not neutral with regard to the conflict between his desire to take the drug and his desire to refrain from taking it. So this is perfect. So he has one of those things that he wants to be effective, and that's his volition of the second order. So that's the unwilling addict, where he's like, he is taking this drug and he's addicted to it, but he doesn't want that desire to be effective. That's the unwilling addict. And the other addict, though, he says, is a wanton. So his actions reflect the economy of his first order desires without his being concerned whether the desires that move him to act are desires by which he wants to be moved to act. So this is a person who's just like non-reflectively just addicted, and he's neither happy to be addicted nor unhappy. It's just what he does.
So
he's almost like...
Just to clarify, is it someone who lacks second order desires then?
No,
like,
he lacks second order volition.
Okay.
Yes. Frankfurt's explicit that this person could have second order desires, but not a second order volition. So I actually I like that distinction. And he says, whether he is human or not, the wanton may, perhaps due to conditioning, both want to take the drug and want to refrain from taking it, so 2 second-order desires. Unlike the willing addict, however, he does not prefer that one of his conflicting desires should be paramount over the other. He does not prefer that his first-order desire, rather than the other, should constitute his will. So this is exactly, I think, what I was trying to say.
So wait, can we go back to where exactly is that? Which page?
I apologize. 12 going into 13.
Okay, because I feel like that was that was pretty early on, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that was the difference between the unwilling addict and the wanton. He's again differentiating, just between. He's trying to give us these good kind of nice examples where fleshing out the concept of the wanton more. So I guess we should skip ahead. Oh wait, this was the line that reminded me about on Bullshit More. He says, when a person acts, the desire by which he is moved is either the will he wants or a will he wants to be without. When a wanton acts, it is neither. I like that. It's the same thing with the bullshitter. He, someone either tells the truth or he conforms to the expectation of a lie. But when a bullshitter confabulates, he does neither. Right? It's that same parallel that he's tying in with the wanton. So let's skip to the free will stuff, because that's where it connects with the rest of the series. So he says in section 3, 14.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Page.
Well, I honestly, you just start going, and it's like it's much better to be able to read it while you're talking.
I apologize. I get a little too emphatic about it. So he says in section 3, first line, there is a very close relationship between the capacity for forming second-order volitions and another capacity that is essential to persons. It is only because a person has volitions of the second order that he is capable both of enjoying and of lacking freedom of the will. The concept of a person is not only then the concept of a type of entity that has both first-order desires and volitions of the second order. It can also be constructed as the concept of an entity for whom the freedom of its will may be a problem. So this is where he's getting into, the free will debate. So last paragraph, he says, having the freedom to do what one wants. Having the freedom to do having the freedom to do what one wants to do is not a sufficient condition for having free will. It is not a necessary condition either. But he says that, this is next page, 15-second paragraph. When we ask whether a person's will is free, we are not asking whether he is in a position to translate his first-order desires into actions. And he says that this is true because there are just kind of pragmatic, just very low-level difficulties in doing that sometimes. Like we can be obstructed by things, and that's not because it's clear in that case that you could still have. That's not corrupting of a sense of free will. That's corrupting of a sense of you being able to sort of implement your goals, right? So that's not exactly what he's talking about. He says, third paragraph, it seems to me both natural and useful to construe the question of whether a person's will is free in close analogy to the question of whether an agent enjoys freedom of action. Now, freedom of action is, roughly at least, the freedom to do what one wants to do. Analogously, then, the statement that a person enjoys freedom of the will also roughly that he is free to want what he wants to want. It's a little bit wordy, but so this is basically, from what I'm understanding, this is that endorsement of his second order volition or the third order will, or I'm sorry, the third order desire, not the third order will. So let me read that again. Analogously, then, the statement that a person enjoys freedom of the will means that he is free to want what he wants to want. Which actually, I mean, it's a little bit wordy at first, but it's making more sense to me. So
it makes less sense taken out of the tiered orders that we've discussed, especially once he uses the word free.
Yes, but I think that what he's saying here is that like freedom of the will consists in the ability to select which of your second order desires becomes your second order volition, i.e., to have an effective third order desire, right?
So he's basically defining free will then as simply the capacity to have a third order desire,
i.e., to want what you in fact want.
right?
Yes.
I don't know. The more we like frame it this way, I start to doubt more that he would agree. But it's very uncertain position I'm taking here because I don't know Frankfurt as well.
But to be fair, like, what else would I don't?
I mean, this was written in the 70s, so
Yeah, but I'm not. But he's speaking English. Like, are we really like? What are we doing? That I don't see us really stretching him very much at all. Like, if you're free to want what you want to want, I mean, let's just walk that backwards. So
yeah,
the last want there is the first order desire.
Yes.
And then the second want, you want to want that, is the second order desire.
Yes, absolutely.
So if you're free to want what you want to want, that means you have some sort of control over which second order desire becomes a second order volition. That's for sure what Frankfurt says. And then we're adding the i.e., the third level, the third order desire.
Yeah.
I really don't think we're stretching him very much.
The asterisk that I would introduce is like whether it's simply having the third order desire or being free to choose the third order desire, if that makes sense.
Okay, so he might elucidate your question. I have some other quotes from him that might elucidate that.
Outside of this paper?
No.
Okay.
Inside the paper. So skip to page 17. He says, it also satisfies another condition that must be met by any such theory, a theory of free will, by making it apparent why the freedom of the will should be regarded as desirable. The enjoyment of a free will means the satisfaction of certain desires of the second or of higher orders, whereas the absence means their frustration. So I think that this is making it clear that he's asking, so he's saying, now this is where his true compatibilism comes out, I think. So he's saying that the free will that exists is the only freedom that we could ever want to have, namely being able to select which second order desire becomes a volition, i.e., what our third order desire is. And so now this is where I begin to disagree with him, because up until this point, I've found everything he said very these are wonderful distinctions that he's making. They're very important ones. But I think that they are I don't think that they're a robust conception of true compatibilism, because the ability to choose what desire is effective or what second order volition is effective, I think, is either one of two things. It's either parasitic on the contra-causal libertarian free will, or if it's not, it's then corrupted by causal determinism, vitiating the sense of could have done otherwise, right? So I think that his claim has to collapse into one of two subsequent claims. He's either saying that this ability to, now, which is not to say that, like, I think what he's doing is extremely valuable, but I think it's valuable in evaluating types of persons or types of actions. I don't know that what he's doing is actually talking about free will in the style that the rest of the series has been talking about it.
I absolutely agree. I kind of read this and it was like, wow, it is quite useful and like probably novel in the 70s to like articulate differences in like desire tiers, like hierarchy of desires. Mm-hmm. Like super cool, useful, and like, you know, provokes like, you know, self-reflection.
And I think it's actually very valuable for questions of moral responsibility. Like, I actually do think that this is very relevant for questions of moral responsibility, but it's not a satisfying conception of what free will is. I think he introduces distinctions that are hugely relevant for moral responsibility,
Yeah.
but almost paradoxically not for freedom of the will. But nonetheless, his distinctions are clearly relevant. Like what I'm saying is there is clearly a difference between being a wanton or not. And there's also a difference between being an unwilling addict or a willing addict or not, right?
Yeah.
But I just don't think that either of those are actually doing the compatibilism that he thinks they are, because, like I said, he either has to be making the claim that there is this agent causal free will that you can choose which second order desire becomes a volition, in which case it seems like he has to be endorsing some sort of libertarianism, namely of the agent causal type, or that ability to determine which of your second order desires is vitiated by causal determinism plus randomness in the same way that we've been discussing.
I don't know. I kind of view it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think he does. I think he does kind of free up the will a little bit, in the sense that
free up the will.
Well, no, like I chose those words deliberately because I think that, like, by pushing it back a few layers, it's not to say that, like, determinism isn't true, but it's to say that, you know, he's kind of like acknowledging the fact that there is, you know, differentiation made by us, although it may be determined. Yeah. But there is, like, you know, the will itself is the product of, second order, or effective will, I mean, is the product of, you know, second order volitions, which then could be the product of, you know, third order desires, which honestly reflect, you know, honestly just how your brain's working, who you are.
Yeah.
So I think, like, in terms of, like, the actual will, I think he does free it up a bit there. And I think you guys are maybe a little, you're kind of like adopting Galen a little bit too much, like, in kind of viewing this paper. Like, I think, like, it made a very interesting distinction to me.
I thought it was an interesting distinction too.
I think you are maybe misunderstanding me if you think that I would disagree with anything you said there.
No, because I think the thing is, you're saying that, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying that he needs to collapse this into one or the other. It needs to either be libertarian, you know, free will, or he just needs to acknowledge causal determinism. But I think like that there is, like, he could, you know, under, like, everything he's just written, still fully acknowledge causal determinism.
Yeah.
But free up the will part of it.
Well, so I would change the way you categorize me just very slightly. I don't think he has to collapse it into either one of those things. But I think if we're searching for, because remember, like, the way I'm viewing moral responsibility is, there's two levels to it, right? There's, like, a deep sense of moral responsibility, and then there's a shallow sense. If we're asking, or, you know, vice versa about free will, right? So, like, I'm saying that if you are of a Galen type ilk on this, right, then his claim, if you're drilling in on his claim, like, at the end of the day, he either has to be making a claim of agent causal libertarianism that determines the third order desires, right? Or he would have to admit at the end of the day that, like, no, how do I determine what's the type of person I want to be? Like, how do I determine what third order desire I have? The truth is I don't. Like, I just have the third order desire I have, and I don't have the ones I don't have. And that, like, I have no causal role in that. But I'm not saying that his distinctions don't matter in their own framework, because, like, they obviously do. Like, these are incredibly important distinctions of types of persons and types of actions. But those are in the shallow sense. So the way I'm viewing the entirety of this kind of series, like, this is my perspective, is we start off on the roller coaster of like, here's the gold standard contra-causal free will, right? And we don't have that because it's incoherent and because there's no reason to believe that we have it. And then we plunge down that roller coaster and we hit the bottom of accepting Galen. There is no deep sense in which anyone is morally responsible for anything. And then P.F. Strawson brings me back up a little bit, and he says, well, we can't get on without the concepts of reactive attitudes, i.e. the practices of moral responsibility. And I grant him that. I say, okay. And then we get to the intricate projects of what types of shallow moral responsibility are appropriate and in what circumstances. And that's where I believe that all of these distinctions are very wonderful.
Yeah, and I think I would agree with all that, except for maybe like, and it's really a semantic point, but honestly, like the deep and shallow aspect, I feel like, you know, after reading this paper personally, like the shallow end of the pool just got 20 feet deeper. You know what I mean? Like it did, because it's like, I mean, like, okay, so like if I frame something like this, like you know, I don't know. Say, Giffen, I'm going to choose you, all right?
I would expect anything less.
I'm sorry, Giffen.
No,
okay, but like, say I like wronged you in such a way and I wanted to do it, right?
You already have.
But then in fact, I really wanted to wrong you.
He wanted that to be his effective desire. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and like it goes like a few layers deep. That like, you know, like I was actually like endorsing this behavior.
Yeah.
I think there is like, you know, in a real sense, I'm not responsible for who I am, but I am pretty bad though. You know what I mean? Like yes. I in a way, like, you know, I am a pretty bad character, and you know,
do you think Jordan and I would disagree there?
Wait, can I clarify?
No, but I wouldn't have thought about it in those terms necessarily before reading this paper, okay. And I think that it doesn't say anything about the ultimate nature of moral responsibility.
Yeah.
But I think it adds like a few layers to how you go ahead.
In your example, the way I would phrase how I view it is it doesn't make the shallow end deeper. It makes it wider. It gives you more area to swim in it. Because I think the depth of the pool is determined or vitiated by the sense of could have done otherwise. Like that's what it hinges on for me.
Can I add another layer to this analogy?
Well, wait, hold on. What was Adam? I wasn't finished, but what were you going to say, Adam?
I was going to say, I mean, he seems like he wrote a paper on that, right? Like he read like one of the
possibilities.
In one of the footnotes here, he said like, I respond to, let me see here.
It's probably his possible alternate possibilities, or I can't remember the name of the paper.
Let's see if we can find that exact quote, though. Okay, it's at the bottom of 19. He said, for another discussion of the considerations that cast doubt on the principle that a person is morally responsible for what he has done only if he could have done otherwise, see my alternate possibilities of moral responsibility.
Yeah,
I kind of want to read that. Like I want to see
the paper I referenced at the beginning. Yeah, we should definitely read. This is the 69 paper, the one that I said was right before this one.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what his take is, because I think everything you said so far has been pretty interesting.
I agree.
So I want to read more about this guy.
Yes, we definitely should. But like, so I was just trying to make sure that I was being clear about how I was viewing this, though. So what I was saying is, like, I think that all of his conceptions are really excellent in sort of the area of the shallow pond, that's Peter Singer's shallow pond, the shallow end of the pool. But I don't think it makes it any deeper, because for me, the depth of the pool is based on the sense of could have done otherwise. Now, maybe his paper will change my mind about that, the alternative possibilities. But what I was saying, though, is that the area of the shallow part consists in the richness in which we might evaluate persons or characters, right? So this adds a ton of surface area in how we can evaluate kind of the constitution of persons or their character?
I don't know though. I mean, like it's like okay. So imagine this. Well, let me get off this point real fast.
Yeah.
You're so sorry, Giffen.
No
But
problem.
like, would you like differentiate between like the moral responsibility of a wanton versus like someone who actually endorses second order volitions
Yeah.
say like you so like that's kind of like I think a good point though to bring up is that if he's like I think if he's like differentiating between like different degrees of moral responsibility, I wonder if it's like a deeper sense that he's pointing to, like if somebody is kind of moving through different levels of desires and is endorsing them regarding like the however which way they've wronged you versus someone that just simply acts on first order desires.
I got it.
Like
I
I kind of hold somebody like more morally responsible in a deeper sense because
I get what you're saying. The pull of the illusion is stronger in one of those senses than the other, in a way
stronger.
In a way that calling it an illusion is a bit pays injustice to.
I think so.
I understand that view. I differ from it slightly because it's like, sorry, Giffen. I differ from it slightly because is the wanton on a playing field with the willing addict, or the unwilling addict, I should say, sorry, more or less morally responsible? In one sense, no. Like they're neither of them are morally responsible in any way, in a deep sense. But the problem is that I think the way that they might be more and less morally responsible in the shallow sense is cashed out by something that Frankfurt wouldn't endorse. For me, that would be consequences, right? Like, can this person be like reintegrated into society? Is this person a danger to themselves and others? Like, does this person have to be dealt with? And it kind of comes down to more, I guess, kind of like, maybe like calculating or cold consequentialist reasons for it. But I fully admit that, like, as per P.F. Strawson, like, the reactive attitudes are the default especially for interpersonal life, and those can be modified. So insofar as I'm admitting there's different depths to the shallow part of the pool, I think I would be saying that the reactive attitudes can be modified a bit by like whether we're conceptualizing someone as kind of a wanton or a willing addict or an unwilling addict, right? Like those are, but I'm viewing those as rather shallow differentiations when the floor of the pool can be so deep. Does that, while admitting that all of those differences are very important, and that's all I'll say to Giffen.
May I?
You go ahead, Giffen.
Yeah. All right. So I just wanted to phrase it. Once you brought up the pool analogy, something immediately came to my mind, and this might be, I don't know, more or less useful. But to me, it's like, I agree with Jordan that the pool didn't get deeper, like the shallow end didn't get deeper. To me, it was like the idea of using the tiered desires is useful in a like moral responsibility sense to me, in a way that makes the gradations finer in the shallow end. Like before, like I probably like without that tool, I would have been using coarse adjustments. But like with the idea of like this second and third order desires, and like I think that adds like a lot of fine details to the kind of discussion. That's all I wanted to say.
Because basically the way I'm viewing all of these compatibilist accounts, there's actually another one that we could read. It's by Dana Nelkin. She endorses, from what I understand, like a certain type of reasons responsiveness view, which is interesting. But the way that I'm viewing kind of all of these different types of compatibilism is they are all extremely valuable and extremely useful, but not exactly in the way that they present themselves as being. It's all sort of like I just see the like moral responsibility really is just dealt a death blow, I think, by Galen Strawson and Dirk Pereboom. Like I just buy their arguments 100%. But then when I do also admit that like P.F. Strawson's right that reactive attitudes are what constitute interpersonal life, then I'm forced to like evaluate when we it's almost funny, like when we act as if people had moral responsibility. I don't like that way of phrasing it, but it's like I don't like the way of phrasing it at all. Actually, I don't know why I said it. But so these compatibilist accounts give us wonderful. It turns a piece of bread into an English muffin, right? Like there's all of these kind of different ways of evaluating people's character and kind of looking at people as persons or not. Yeah, I don't know. Like that's how I'm viewing it.
To me, those were like the greater, like finer gradations that I was referring to. Is like with more tools, you have like more complexity and more nuance in the evaluation. But there is still like you never get to the deep end of the pool. Like there's no in deep sense like moral responsibility.
There's no ultimate moral responsibility for sure. But it's like, but that's not the end. Like this is where I would disagree with Galen Strauss. Like that's not the end of the project. Do you know what I mean? Like it's that roller. It's like okay, there's no libertarian, so it's completely incoherent, like in a deep sense. But like P.F. Strawson's right. Like we do have to have reactive attitudes. And then I disagree with Strawson, where like, no, I think they can be refined in a way, and the way that I think they can be refined is in these compatibilist ways, these differentiations that they bring out. But I don't agree with the compatibilists that like, if these certain conditions are met, then there's more responsibility warranted from there. I'm using their distinctions in a more piecemeal way than that. And it's grounded, I think my current view is that all of those are grounded by consequentialist concerns of blame and punishment. So, deterrence, containment, rehabilitation, concerns like that. So I'm just kind of a weird clusterfuck right now, honestly, of a bunch of different philosophers and their views. But I think that I have rather well-formed reasons for what I believe. Obviously, it's open to change, but like this is where I'm currently at, having read all of this stuff.
Yeah. Jordan, I feel like we're on the same page here. I'm not sure to what extent Adam would agree.
Yeah, I don't know. I wanted to
at least
disagree.
No, agree.
Oh, I was like, he definitely doesn't disagree.
No, I think he's like, nearly to where I think we're both at. I'm just not 100% sure.
Yeah, I was just curious. I wanted to spell that out fully, Adam, for you, so you could see if there was any area of disagreement.
It's not that I disagree in any like meaningful sense. It's just that I think, I don't know, this paper had a pretty strong impact on my view of like moral responsibility. So whether we want to say it didn't deepen the pool, it widened the pool, gradations, it made the the bread a muffin. I mean, however, like in terms of like verbiage, we may disagree. Like I think like generally we're on the same page. So.
Yeah, because like I like, there's one line by him on page 19 that I like. He says, suppose that when a person has done what he wanted to do, that he did it because he wanted to do it, and that the will by which he was moved when he did it was his will because it was the will he wanted. Then he did it freely and of his own free will. Like, I think that's perfect. Like, I love that conceptualization, but it's only pragmatically that he did it. Like, it's not a deep sense. It's a shallow sense in which he did it of his own free will. Because there is there's a distinction in my mind between being locally compelled to do something versus ultimately compelled to do something. Like, the thing I take away from the Galen paper is that everything is basically a special case of compulsion, right? Like, we're all forced to do exactly what we do and nothing else. And we don't have any control over that. That being said, there's a difference between you holding me at gunpoint to sign a document and me willingly sign the document. Those are all just pragmatic differences to me, though. And those, I think, are just where I find this compatibilist literature so useful.
And also just like, I feel like it's like when examining, just like when someone, doesn't meet the basic demand that P.F. Strawson kind of lays out. Like, I think that there's like a greater violation of the basic demand. Someone operating, kind of differentiating between second order desires if someone wrongs you. Like, I feel like I feel like that basic demand that I have has been violated, just in a greater sense than someone acting wantonly. So
a Cornell social psychologist, has actually done some interesting work on this. David Pizarro, he I don't know which study it was of his. Might have even been part of his thesis. I don't remember. But he did work showing that I'm gonna butcher the details of this, but like he did empirical work showing that people alter the blame that they cast on people based on whether they think that their second order desire aligned with the first order desire. So like for instance, and it makes total sense. Like if you they gave people an example of like I don't know the details of how they presented this so as to be statistically scrupulous, but there's an example where like someone in a bar like punches another person, and it was like I don't know how they did it, but they made it clear that it was very reactive, very impulsive, and people blamed him less than someone who went to the bar planning to punch that person and then punched them. And it's because people implicitly assume that the person's, in the first case, their second order desire conflicts with the first, and in the second, they align, and it's their second order volition.
That sounds like an excellent read.
Yeah. Well, he did it. I remember. He used this paper explicitly to design that social psych study, which was very cool.
This was a pretty good paper. This was very good.
Oh, wonderful paper.
This Frankfurt paper, yeah.
100% agree.
I'm glad.
Remarkable. It's from 71.
Well, this was the P.F. Strawson. So the P.F. Strawson paper and this paper, and there was a huge explosion of work in this area in the 60s and 70s. And from what I understand, it died down a little bit. What are you laughing at? You just think of absurd things again?
No, it's just Giffen. Giffen clearly has a very lowly opinion. It's like the third time he's commented. Like,
people in the 70s. Like it must have been Neanderthals.
Yeah, I just like I don't really get.
I'm not amazed that this came out of the 70s. Like I don't share the intuition.
Giffen keeps remarking like I can't believe it was the 70s. But they actually had such novel ideas. It's like
I thought they were still fighting with sticks back then.
Dude, we had
remarkable.
We had I don't know, we had the space like. I don't know. I don't think I
was remarking about how like
I blew past that the first two times. I was like, I guess it's not surprising that it was written in the 70s, but like, you're right. He said it 3 times.
Well, I was just like, the first 2 times I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess. The third time, I'm like, I'm like, people were thinking about pretty interesting things in the 70s. Yeah.
Like, I mean, what's the oldest philosophy paper was the 34 paper by Bertrand Russell.
In Defense of Idleness.
Yeah, in Defense of Idleness. Yeah, that was from like the 30s. Yeah. I can't believe he could read and write back then.
That's exactly what my claim was.
Honestly, the first thing that came to mind when you even made that remark was I was just like, I thought the 70s was composed of a bunch of wantons,
How can I know?
All right, I think we're good to wrap it up with this. I liked
to end on.
Giffen, surprised that anyone had a coherent thought in the 70s.
That is the summation of my belief on this paper.
But I was just gonna, like I was saying before we got on the tangent, that there was like an explosion of this literature in the 60s and 70s. And I think it's reemerged in the late 2000s as another blow up. So yes, okay. Well, I don't know what paper we're gonna do next, but hopefully you're still enjoying the series, and we'll tune in next time for it.